Well, hello everybody. Happy 4th of July. I'm just getting off work. I think I'm going to go home, drink a very, very stiff drink. I'm going to pour myself a glass of bourbon, and that's what I'm going to do today. I was going to go over to my relative's house for the 4th, but I just think that... it's a terrible thing to say. I can't deal with my relatives. And they're not, they're not actually that hard to deal with. They're nice people. They're just, usually they're nice people. Not always. And that's kind of, I don't know. So, I don't know who to talk to about this stuff other than maybe my therapist. I don't know if YouTube is the appropriate forum for all this stuff. But, it's a very hard thing. Some of these other videos I've been talking about school and about all the things I wish I'd known and all the things. And the bitch of it is I would have known if I had gone and spent some time in the library and just looking at books and browsing and picking things up off of shelves. One of the stories I tell people about that is, I remember one day, I didn't ditch class very often. If I was going to ditch, I'd just ditch the whole day. I didn't usually ditch class, but occasionally, especially in 9th grade, I got to a point where I just couldn't handle it anymore, and I was ditching school more and more. And particularly math class and gym class, because, gym class, who the fuck needs it? Math class, I sucked at, and nobody was terribly interested in helping me to not suck at it, or helping me to understand why I was as bad at it as I was. So, I'd go up to there was a park about half a block up from my junior high school, so I'd go up there. And there's a library not far from the park, so sometimes I'd just go in there. And one time, me and these two buddies of mine, we just, were hanging out at the library and started looking through these National Geographics, right? They had all these, National Geographic magazines. And there's some article on, some South American tribe or something, and there's all these shirtless women walking around, and it's just there in this National Geographic magazine. We're just sitting there staring at this magazine like, oh, boobies, we thought we'd struck gold. This was long before the internet, so you couldn't really, internet porn wasn't really a thing. So we were kind of in seventh heaven here, staring at these National Geographics with these topless women like, wow, dude, look at this. And I kind of tell that story to illustrate a point, and that is this. If I had ever thought about, well, what else is available to me here? What other kinds of information? Topless women, okay, there's that. What else? I would never have been so easily, I don't know how to put it, led astray. All my life I thought I was not doing well in school because I was a defective person. And it wasn't until much later I realized that by and large that was what my family wanted me to think. That was kind of the goal. John Holt, I think I've mentioned that name before, pointed out in one of his books, I want to say it was in Instead of Education. I can't remember which one. I can't remember that for sure. It might have been How Children Learn. I can't remember. Anyway. But he points out that the only thing more satisfying than watching a child learn and grow and become more independent is watching that child fail and being able to thumb your nose at him. And who better to do that to than a child, where failure is kind of built in. It's kind of part of the process. Kids don't know how to be independent adults. That's why they're kids, right? If I said, why don't we let a 10-year-old just go live on his own and have an apartment and have a job, then people would say, well, you're crazy. A 10-year-old doesn't know how to do those things. Of course not. That 10-year-old needs adult guidance, not adults bashing him, berating him, humiliating him, telling him what a terrible person he is. Guidance. Here's what we understand about the world that you don't at 10 years old. That's what a 10-year-old needs. And that has to be a continuous conversation. It has to be a continuous dialogue. It has to keep going. It can't just be, well, you don't know what we know because you don't want to, because you're a terrible person. And this is kind of what I heard over and over growing up from my parents, from my relatives, from the people around me. There's just kind of this, if you weren't such a terrible person, you wouldn't be asking for our help, and you would certainly not be suggesting that you need help or that you need any kind of guidance. And I did. I needed it desperately. And I was very, very honest about it. And I began spiraling into the worst depression of my life. And like a lot of kids that age who are being told those kinds of things, there were adults, particularly once I got to high school, there were adults around me who I think really would have tried to help me if they had understood just how badly I needed it. And I never reached out to those people because I thought, well, they won't help me. They're adults. That's not what adults do. Adults are not here to help children. Adults are not here to be guides and mentors to children. They don't believe that's their role. And the only reason I want to tell this story is because I can't talk necessarily to, like, what was my family's motivation in doing this? What was going through their head? Why did they do this to me? I don't know. What I do know is that if I ever want to forgive them for it, I first have to find some way to forgive myself for letting it happen to me, because I didn't have to. There were lots of other schools I could have been in. There were lots of other places I could have gone to pursue an education. I live in a state, I think I've talked about this before, I live in a state with probably the most liberal compulsory education laws in the country. And I never knew about it. I really thought, if I don't go to a traditional public school, I'll go to jail. Those are my two options. And that's what my parents wanted me to think. That's what my relatives wanted me to think. I really believed that I was helpless and powerless and disenfranchised, and that there was nothing I could do to help myself. And as a direct result of that, I dropped out of high school. And as an indirect result of that, I am 36 years old and deliver pizzas for a living and can't even pay my bills. I really did not see how I could spend that time learning and growing. I wanted to do that, but I didn't know how to do that. And I knew that. That was the frustrating thing. I knew that there was something to this that I wasn't seeing. Anyway, so that's kind of the short version of what happened to me in school. And it didn't have to. One way that it could have not happened is that my parents and my relatives, the adults around me, could have tried to listen to me, could have tried to understand where I was coming from, and tried to help me understand what it was they got out of school, what it was they did, how they did it. To this day, I come from a family of people, most of whom have at least a master's level of education. And to this day, I don't know why they went to school. I don't know what they got out of it. I don't know what they learned. I don't know what, if any, goal they had in attending college in the first place, because they've never ever talked about it. All they've said is, we understood the value of having a degree. We understood that there are more jobs available to a person with a degree than without. And I don't understand that. I don't understand that point of view. I don't understand that, you went to college not to learn anything, not to gain any kind of skill, not to meet anybody or network with anybody, or to understand anything about the world that you don't understand. You went to get a piece of paper. You went to get a piece of paper. I don't understand that. And that somehow that, not any skill you have, not any ability to function in that environment, not any ability you have to obtain that degree, but the degree itself is why you have the job you have, because you got a degree and you walked up and down the street waving it around. Anyway, that's a thing that I've never understood, and they have never tried to help me understand it. And they've never talked to me about it. They've never explained it to me. But the flip side of that is, when I was growing up, and I think maybe I didn't want to. I think maybe I didn't want to know that, these people are clearly just lying to me, and something is not right here. And I knew something wasn't right, I just didn't know what. And so I should have gone to the library. This is a really important point. You couldn't get online back then and, look this stuff up. You can now, a lot of it. And realize just how many different ideas there are about how children should be educated, and the way that school has to kind of try to be all things to all people, even though it can't really ever be that. And how some people who've had the very same struggle that I had in school have dealt with it. Whether or not you think it's the right way or not, there were ways of dealing with it. And I would have very quickly gone from being disempowered and disenfranchised to being empowered and enfranchised. And so on the one hand, what my family did to me really is abuse. On the other hand, I let it happen. I didn't know any better, and I didn't find out any better. I think even then I knew where I could go to find out, and I didn't do it. And I can't forgive them. It's hard for me now to even be in the same room with some of those people, knowing not just what they did to me, but what I let them do. How can I forgive them when I can't forgive myself? That's the thing about forgiveness. You have to be able to forgive yourself before you can forgive anyone else. You have to stop blaming yourself, stop replaying all the things you should have said and done, all the things you could have done differently, and there were so many things that I could have and should have done differently. So many things. I argued, but I never fought. I never fought. I never just stopped going to school. I never just dropped out like I should have. Even when I did, even when I was an adult and I had dropped out of school and I had a full-time job and was working, I gave it all up. I gave up everything I wanted to go to college. Everything that mattered to me. Because I thought I had to, and I didn't. I didn't have to give that all up. I didn't have to just quit my job and go to college and hope like hell that somehow, in some way I couldn't possibly foresee, somehow I'd figure out a way to make it work. I didn't have to do that. And I did because I didn't know what else to do. And granted, yes, that's what my family wanted me to do. That's what they told me to do. They did everything they could to get me to do it. I am leaving out some rather important details about how exactly they did that. But I don't know just how personal I want to get here, but oh, it was it wasn't all bad. It wasn't, in a way, I got to have this kind of weird second childhood. I got to go to school and even kind of enjoy certain things about it. But it took me 5 years to get a 2-year degree, and I am convinced that the only reason I was able to do it at all was because I was hanging around a friend of mine, and he and I were sort of working on it at the same time. And there's something about having him there, I think, that really made the difference. I know that sounds weird. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but I just can't imagine doing it now. School is very, very hard for me, and I don't know why. I don't know why it's so hard, bordering on impossible, and I wish to God it wasn't. I wish there was some way. And, I've talked a little bit more about that. I've talked about, what I should have done back then. And what I would like to do now, if I could just scrape together the time and the money somehow. But there again, see, how can I forgive my family for trying to shove me as hard as they could into college when I can't forgive myself for going, when I knew that I shouldn't, when I knew that it was a huge, huge risk, when I knew that what I was doing was dangerous, just financially and emotionally and everything else. I knew that there was a very, very good chance that I was going to fail, and I did it anyway. How do I forgive myself? And it's very important that I do, because unless I can do that, I can't forgive them either. That is the thought I'm going to leave you with. And I'm sorry to kind of rant on and bore people with my personal problems. I know that YouTube is probably not the best forum for that, but I think that there's probably a lot of people out there who've gone through similar things, and I hope somehow just knowing that other people are going through that will be helpful to them. Anyhow, I'm going to get myself some dinner. I'm going to pour myself a nice stiff glass of bourbon and call it a night. And I will see you guys tomorrow.